This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Welcome back, everybody. In this video, we are going to be talking about color as it relates to Sony cameras in video. Now, obviously, the ZV-1 was released this week. I've done a couple videos on that now. A lot of people have been asking about color options, what has changed. What I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be centering this around the ZV-1, but all of these concepts actually apply to all of Sony's cameras in terms of picture profiles. That's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk a little bit about color grading. And if you're interested in getting consistency from model to model, this information is going to be really good for you to understand. Now, by default, the ZV-1 has been tweaked in terms of the way that the default color algorithms work in several ways. So first of all is exposure. And one of the things that they're doing is putting an emphasis or kind of a spot exposure around the face. So it's going to center around skin tones. The result of this is if you are walking and vlogging and let's say your lighting changes and all of a sudden you might be backlit and you come back into something that's a little more evenly lit, it's going to maintain exposure with a priority on the face, which I think is cool. And really, I mean, losing highlight detail and stuff like that in a vlog type situation, you're probably not as worried about. However, the color that they have put into the algorithms on this camera is a little bit different in that they're trying to put an emphasis on the skin tone color. I have found in my initial video when I ran that this tends to lead at times towards the red side of things. Now, if you're just doing a vlog and you're keeping things really informal and casual, this stuff probably doesn't matter too much. You just want it to look good enough. But there's so much more that you can do. And I think one of the cool things about the ZV-1, I mean, this is certainly being, promoted as a vlogging camera, which I think is really cool, but there's some really advanced video functionality in here in terms of color that I think make this an incredible camera, especially for its size. If you're doing more cinema types of things and you need a small camera to go somewhere where a larger camera can't, this is really good stuff to know. So I want to break this down a little bit in this video. So the first thing that you want to understand about getting your camera out of the default color space is this concept that Sony have in these cameras called picture profiles. So if you're in your menu system, and this could be on any Sony camera that supports picture profiles, which is most of them. Usually if you go into the function menu, you're going to see them listed there. It's going to be where it says PP and this one is turned off. If you don't see it there, what you want to do is go into the menu and you're going to go into tab 1, which is quality image size. You're going to scroll down and you are going to go over to the section that says color, white balance, image processing, and you're going to all the way at the bottom in this camera, and it's changed from menu to menu, but it's somewhere in this vicinity. You're going to see picture profile, and in this case it is turned off. I would highly recommend that you put that in the function menu so that you can bounce around really quickly and not have to dive into the menus every time. But what we're going to do is explore this a little bit. Now, by default at any Sony camera, you're going to have a bunch of presets set up. So you're going to see PP1, PP2, PP3. These are picture profiles, picture profile 4, 5, so on and so forth. These are all set up with different presets, so to speak. If you go to the right, or you scroll to the right or hit the right arrow on any one of these, you're going to see some options in here. And I can actually set these up and customize them. I can save them however I want. And the cool thing is if you ever want to reset them, it's all the way at the bottom. You can go in and reset each color profile. So the different color profiles that you have in here do different things. And so there's like, for instance, this first one is just set up as a generic movie profile. We also have things like Rec. 709, which is the default color space for video. It's a lot like working in sRGB or Adobe RGB. It's a standardized color space. And then we also have color profiles that are going to squeeze more dynamic range into the picture. And so you have things like Cine 1, Cine 2, Cine 3, Cine 4. Depending on how old your Sony camera is, it may predate some of these, but usually they all have Cine profiles, which is actually a really good profile to work with. Some of the newer cameras have log profiles, and so most cameras have S-Log2. The newer ones have moved up to S-Log3, which is an excellent profile. This one does require color grading. And then we also have what are known as these HLG profiles. So an HLG profile stands for hybrid log gamma. These are essentially HDR profiles. So if you think of a color space, whether it's sRGB, we talked about Rec. 709, these are in what we call a 2020 color space, which is a very wide gamut of light that you can display, but you do have to have a monitor that supports it. So if you have an HDR TV, for instance, or an HDR monitor that would support 2020 color space, then you can reproduce it. If you just put this on your iMac or whatever monitor you've got that only only supports 709. It's going to look really weird and blown out. But you can use these in the same way we use log profiles, in that you're capturing in a larger space, and you can use a LUT, or you can actually do some grading to bring this into a color space. And so we're going to get into a couple of these, because these are really important if you want to be able to control the colors you get out of the default space. We'll do some comparisons in a second so you can see these, and you can create stuff that's much more unique. And that has always been the biggest draw to me, and one of the reasons that I use Sony's a lot for my filming. I've used them for vlogs. I've even vlogged in S-Log profiles before and done a bunch of color grading later. It's more work, but the effort and the time that you put into it is always worth it, because the results are just outstanding. You get a lot of control over your color. You're able to keep things consistent. If I use, let's say, a ZV-1 or an RX105, I use my Sony a7 III that I'm filming on right now in S-Log 3, I can get consistency going across multiple sensors, multiple cameras, and that's something that's really exciting to me. You're getting out of that default color space and you're opening up your options. This is also very helpful if you're looking for a certain look. So if you want maybe a more of a film look to your image, maybe you want something that's just really modern and really saturated and really bright. Maybe you're dealing with a high contrast situation where you've got really bright brights with a sunset, let's say, and then shadow detail that you need to be able to pull out. This is another reason that you want to be able to use picture profiles, particularly in a high contrast case like that. We're going to look at some of these too. I would recommend HLG or S-Log 2, probably S-Log 3 is my recommendation on that. So we're going to get into some of these. I want to talk about how they work. I've got some free downloads for you guys if you want to try some LUTs on your own footage. But first, I want to give a real quick shout out to our sponsor this week, who are the awesome folks over at Squarespace.com. Present your photography using Squarespace's modern professional portfolios. The layouts are completely customizable, and you can use Squarespace's drag and drop based backend system, which is really easy to use to present your work the way that you want it seen. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for building beautiful websites, easily claiming your domain or URL, and creating a custom site that brings your ideas to life. Squarespace is host to a number of other tools, including e-commerce, appointment scheduling, and analytics, so that you can grow your brand and your following. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can go to squarespace.com/AOP to save an additional 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Once again, that is squarespace.com/AOP, and I want to thank the folks at Squarespace for sponsoring another episode of The Art of Photography. I'm going to give you a little intro to picture profiles here, and we're going to be dealing with 3 different profiles. So the first one is actually not a profile, it's just the default footage coming off the camera. I want to see what we just get straight off the camera. The second we're going to be looking at is Cine 2. I think Cine 2 is a really easy profile to work with. It just gives you a little bit flatter image that you can do a little bit of grading on to bring out some contrast and some details, and you can change your color a little bit. It's very versatile. You don't have to change too much on the camera. And then the third one we're going to look at is S-Log 3. And S-Log 3 becomes a little more difficult because, one, you need to know how to expose the camera for it. And then 2, you definitely have to do some grading on it in post-production, which is really essential. So let's go ahead and take a look at some examples here. This first one is just color straight out of the camera. So there's no picture profile on right here. And I just filmed myself standing in the shade here. It's real exciting. But you can see that it looks okay, but the second one that I want to show you is this one, which is Cine 2. So Cine 2 is going to look just a little more milky. There's a little less contrast to it, you can see, and so quick before and after. A lot more contrast in the default profile, and then a lot less in Cine 2. So there's the before and after there. And this third one we're going to look at is S-Log 3, which you can see looks really washed out. Now, why does this look so washed out? So what you got to understand is S-Log 3 is a log profile, and so its intention is to get a wide dynamic range of really bright brights, really dark shadows with detail and everything. And the result is it compresses all these into the image and gives you something that's really washed out. So you have to add some contrast to this, and you have to bump up the saturation, but it's going to give you the most flexibility. But the key here is, I said, you have to learn how to expose for it. The reason is, and I know this gets very detailed, but typically noise when you're shooting at high ISOs is going to live in shadow detail. And so as soon as I start boosting shadows, you're going to start exposing noise. So the whole idea with an S-Log profile, or S-Log 3 in this case, with a log profile, is you need to expose to the right. So expose for your highlights. And as a result, you can see in this image that there's no dark darks at all. Everything looks really bright. Well, that was done intentionally. However, if I color grade this, and so let's say I'm just going to put color wheels on here. We're in Final Cut Pro right now. I'm going to put a custom LUT on here. And when I go over here, I'm going to select a LUT. Let's grab the one I did for the demo here, and you can see that all of a sudden, whoa, that looks a lot better. So a quick before and after. And what the LUT is it's just a color lookup table. It's a file that you can bring into your video editor and you can apply it to your footage to get a certain look. Now, LUTs aren't perfect. Sometimes the exposure is a little off, and this is why I like to add some color wheels. So if I need to tweak things out just a little bit, I can do so. But let me show you where this really comes in handy. Let me give you one more example that's actually some vlog footage in kind of a real world setting here. So this was some footage that I shot last year in New York City. So obviously it's not on the ZV-1, it was shot on the RX100V, but it was shot in S-Log3. So if I were mixing and matching footage, this is really good. I shot it in S-Log3, so at least the log profile is the same, which is going to give me consistency across the board. So what we're going to do is do a quick grade on this and show you how easy this actually is to work with. So what I did is by default, because the exposure is going to be changing with the gimbal, I exposed everything over 2 stops. So it might be a little underexposed. We're going to find out. So the first thing I'm going to do is use color wheels. Then I'm going to grab the custom LUT. And what we're going to do here is go over to the LUT, and I'm going to change that out to the one that we just have been working with. And whoa, already that's looking really good. Now this was taken at sunset, so it's really high contrast. And you can see as I scrub through this clip, we're losing some shadows and we're losing some highlights, but that's actually, let me play this back for you, that actually looks really good. This might be what you want to go with. I have also noticed in my experience that sometimes when things look high contrast, they probably are too high contrast. So there's a couple things that you can do actually to tone this back a little bit. The first thing you can do in Final Cut Pro, you can also do this in Premiere or any other application as well, but under the LUT, I can adjust the mix. And so what we're going to do is bring that mix down just a little bit so it's not nearly as intense. That's one way I could do it. The other thing that you can do is using color wheels before the LUT. I can go in here and change what's being inputted. So I can come in here and lift up my midtones and bring a little less contrast. I can lower my highlights. It's looking really good here. If you're ever nervous about that, let's hit Command 7, look at the scopes. Yeah, so we are going to blow some highlights up here. The shadows look pretty good. I'm going to leave them there. And let's see how this looks now. Let's bring it across. And so here's the woman looking at her phone. It's looking really good. I am very happy with that. Okay, so that's a good looking grade. So what I'm going to do is I have 4 clips here that all used S-Log3. And so what we can do is just copy this grade. So I'm going to Command C and then Option Command V to paste. And yeah, it looks really good right there. We're going to come over here. Wait, whoa, is that Jason Vong? You bet it is. And then finally the vessel, I'm going to go ahead and drop it there. This one is definitely a little too dark. This was a really tough shot and it's underexposed. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bring my highlights up a little bit. Probably going to bring the shadows up here and lift that. Yeah, it's looking really good. So now we have a little sequence here that's consistent and it looks really good in terms of grading. And this is the same LUT that you guys can download. So go download the LUTs, give it a shot, see what you think. I put 2 in there. So I made one for Cine 2 and I made another one for S-Log3. I would actually recommend starting with Cine 2 and make sure you read the setup instructions because you want to make sure your camera is set up correctly. And I'm going to explain exposure for S-Log3. So with Cine 2, you don't get quite as wide of a dynamic range as you will with S-Log3, but it's just easier to work with. You have full access to every ISO setting on the camera and you pretty much just set up and go and then just apply the LUT and it's going to look really good. Now, when you get into S-Log3, a couple things you have to remember. First of all, this will vary from camera to camera depending on what sensor you've got, but the lowest ISO that you can use is usually pretty high. And for instance, in the ZV-1, it is an ISO of 1000, so you can't go below that. In addition to that, you're going to have to overexpose from what the camera wants to do because you want to take full advantage of that dynamic range, and I describe it in the little note that comes in those files. So go read that and you can check it out, but note that because you're operating at such high ISOs all the time, very potentially, this works really well for night photography or night video, obviously, but also for day stuff, you're going to definitely need a neutral density filter. And if you want to shoot wide open, and if you're using a camera that doesn't have one built in, you're going to need to have one because it's just such a high ISO range. So that's a harder one to work with. I think you get better results with it, but Cine 2 is great. I work a lot with Cine 2 myself. And anyway, check those out, see what you think. Drop me a note if you have any questions. I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, later.